The first step in reclaiming studio clay is to take a full bucket of bone dry clay, or mostly bone dry clay, and fill it up with water and let the dry clay slake down. You will now let that bucket full of slaking down clay and water sit for a minimum of 24 hours by moving it out of the way. Good night, little clay. Once your bone dry clay and water have sat long enough for the clay to be fully wetted down, you're going to take some sort of apparatus, in this case an electric drill with a beater on the end, and you are going to plunge the clay and water mixture until it is a uniform thickness. It's important to make sure that you get the mixer all the way down to the bottom where the clay is going to be thickest, and incorporate that well with the liquid at the top. It's usually a good idea to put the mixer in first before turning it on so that you don't get water all over the place. Once I feel that the clay and water is thoroughly mixed, I like to check the thickness and the consistency of it to see if it needs to sit and drain some of the clear water off the top, or if it's ready to go onto the plaster bat. This clay is a good consistency to go on the plaster bats. Always unplug your tools before you wash them off in the sink, just to prevent any accidental electrocutions. Always thoroughly clean your tools before putting them away to help prevent and reduce clay dust in the studio space, especially in community settings or settings that don't have great ventilation. One last thing I like to do before I start dehydrating my slip is to just wipe down my plaster bats. Make sure that we're not cross-contaminating with evaporated mineral salts on the plaster bat or previous clay that was left behind. That way we get a nice clean reclaim with this few extra added things that have to be removed later. Okay, so now we get slopping. So I'm getting a little creative with my video process here because my phone is now tucked into my apron pocket in order to give a POV. So hopefully you're not prone to motion sickness. I'm gonna carefully lift this very heavy bucket up. Okay, so what we need is to get this here so we can start drying it out. think this is going to be the perfect tool for this. And this is literally the process. We don't want it to be more than about 2 to 2.5 inches thick across the depth of and the surface of the plaster bat. Obviously a little thinner towards the edges so that it doesn't run off. I think you get the idea. Once your plaster bats are covered with a thick layer of slip, you're going to let them sit until they're easy to peel up. You're going to flip them over and dry them out for a little bit longer. And then you get to the final step of the process in the reclaim, which is to take your slip logs or piles or slabs and re-wedge them into usable clay, which I will now demonstrate for you. An essential tool for reclaiming and wedging clay is a wire cutter and guns. So here at the community studio, the clay that's being reclaimed is usually quite wet. Also, sometimes it's a good idea to remove any jewelry you don't want to get embedded with clay. So for using my wire tool, I like to pin one end between my leg and the table, which gives me a nice strong leverage point, and then I just slice off manageable lumps and put them on the table, wettest side down, so that the canvas can absorb some of that moisture. And then I just take my first piece. And some studios have access to a pug mill in order to facilitate the reclaim process. Here at the gun show, we prefer to do it the old-fashioned way, with people power. I know how to do spiral wedging, but my wrists are prone to strain and carpal tunnel, so I prefer to do smaller amounts of clay and do the ram's head wedging technique until I notice that the consistency of the clay body feels smooth and even, and I notice there's no more bubbles coming up to the top of the surface, which tend to look like really airy wrinkles. And as I watch those airy wrinkles move their way, see, that's an air bubble. As I watch those airy wrinkles move their way towards the front of the ram's head ball, they puff out and then they collapse as the air gets pushed out of them. There's no set number of turns that equals perfectly wedged clay, because if you have bad technique, you could do 100 turns and still have air bubbles in your clay. If you have good technique, 25 or 50 might be enough. Also, does your clay have a lot of air bubbles in it to begin with? You're going to have to work harder to get those out. But eventually, the clay will look and feel uniform. And then it's literally just a matter of rocking it back and forth. I like to push down and in on my ends as I roll it until I get something that's not quite a log and is not quite a ball. It's an ovoid shape that's ready to either get flattened out for slabs, or if you want, you can kind of rock the bottom, rock the ends, and just give them a nice roundness so that this is literally ready to go into a bag and then taken out to throw. So I start with that and I end with that. So after you've cut your clay into little lumps and wedged it, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing that, and then you keep doing it, and then you do it some more, and then you keep going, and eventually you're done. And now you've got nice lumps of workable clay that has been reclaimed and saved from the bin. The end.